Hello, welcome back. It's so lovely to be here talking to you today. It's been a slightly different week again. My birthday was on Monday. I turned 44 years old. And the weird thing about my birthday is that I really like other people's birthdays, buying the presents, making cakes, love making a cake, all of those things. But I do feel a bit weird about my own birthday. And it isn't that it's getting older. It's more that I think there's this little bit of pressure that comes with it. And, my husband will say to me, is there anything you want to do on your birthday? Would you like a surprise? He'll ask what I fancy. And I feel like there's this pressure to make the right decision. And then I end up choosing nothing, of course. But actually, that does suit me quite nicely. We didn't do much in the end, and that was really lovely. We had a really nice day. It was my son's last GCSE exam as well, and he wanted to have an Indian takeaway to celebrate. So we had a bit of a joint thing. So it was very nice. But there was also a little bit of a mishap because I'd said in my newsletter on Sunday that I was getting a sun hat from my husband for my birthday because of this little bit of skin damage on my nose. And I'd sent him a link to one that I thought looked quite nice, but unbeknown to me, it was an Australian company. And when he went to see where it was in Melbourne. So it looks like I'm going to be having a birthday present on another day. Anyway, there we go. But let's get on with today's episode. So on Sunday, I got the loveliest message from a woman who listens to the podcast. And she hadn't messaged before, but she said she'd found the show back in January, I think, and she'd been really enjoying it. And it really did make my day. It was such a lovely message. And when I wrote back to her, I said that if there's anything that she thinks would be useful to cover, then just to let me know. And well, she did. She came back with a message that has more or less written this whole episode for me. So thank you very much. What she wanted to get to grips with was recovery. And here we're thinking whether it's possible to do too much exercise and how you even know if you are, what the signs of overdoing it look like, how you tell whether a patch of low energy is down to underfueling or doing too much or to do with something else entirely, and then how to stop yourself from pushing too hard in the first place. And then she put it in a way that I've not been able to do any better since. It is a lot, she said, trying to get the balance right. And that line is really today's episode. How much exercise is actually too much, what recovery really is, why you can feel knackered when you think you should be getting fitter and stronger, and how you find the amount of movement that fits your life rather than slowly draining it. But before any of that, here is what happened to me very recently, because I think this is a very good example of what we're going to be explaining in this podcast. So those of you that have been listening for a while will know that I really enjoy running. Brunch runs on Saturday are my favorite of the week. And the whole goal of my running is to come back feeling better than I did when I went out. And I do pretty much always manage that. And for ages, I've been telling myself that those brunch runs are my easy runs. And when we say easy, I mean the kind that you're meant to be able to hold a conversation where the whole point is that you're not pushing too hard. And that is what I definitely thought that I was doing. And then a couple of weeks ago, I went out for a run with a lovely friend of mine, Daisy. She's 30, so she's younger than me, but that's no excuse. But she's very fit. She's an ultra runner, like really fit. And I have to be honest, when she asked me if I wanted to do a bit of her run with her, I panicked a bit about slowing her down, and I panic ate a few sweets because of not wanting to hold her up. And it could have just been an excuse, but I had this feeling that I needed to be really well fueled. But because she's super hardcore, she had already run more than 12 miles across the moors before she even got to me. And then we ran from my house for another 9.5. But even though she is a much faster runner than me, she trains those long runs much slower than me. So a hill that I would normally be trying to push myself to run up, she was like, oh no, we're going to walk this bit because of her heart rate. Now, I do know she had run further than me that day, but even allowing for that, there was no real just pushing through and hammering herself at all. It was just steady the whole way. And like I said, it all done off her heart rate. And it did make me realize that maybe my Saturday runs have not been as easy as I thought. I've always been finishing feeling like I'd worked pretty hard. I'd be holding a decent pace for the whole distance. And even on the days where I wasn't tracking on my watch because I was wanting to chill out a bit more, because it was the same route again and again, I had a rough idea of how long it should take. So I'm wondering if perhaps without even really clocking it, I've been nudging myself to match that time. It's just slight background pressure that perhaps I wasn't noticing. So I took Daisy's advice and I picked a route this last week that I'd never run before. And it still ended up in the same location because obviously I did not want to miss brunch in town, but I didn't have any history of this run. So there's no times, no pace, and there was nothing to measure myself against. And I even decided, because I saw a sign, to change the route slightly as I went along, which did mean that I got quite lost because it turns out I missed a couple of signs. I did get told by a farmer that I was in fact on private property at one point as well. So apologies were made there. But because of this run being the way it was, I ran slower, I ran calmer. It really did feel properly easy. And I felt really good afterwards. And it really did make a big difference because I recovered so much better afterwards. So normally on a Sunday, I take it pretty chill because even though I feel pretty good in my muscles, I don't feel like I've overtrained, I'm still slightly lower in energy. But on Sunday this past week, I felt so good that I decided to go and do a walk on Dartmoor, 6.5 slightly hilly miles. And it was just because I wanted to move. I felt good. So doing less on that one run gave me more the next day. Who'd have thunk it? So more energy, more enjoyment as well. You see, the easy version didn't take anything away from my fitness. And it's the reason that I had anything left in the tank at all. So that is the whole idea that I want to think about today. The amount of exercise that is right for you is not the most you can possibly do or possibly cram in. It's the amount that you can actually recover from, that you can keep doing, and that you can enjoy and quite like. I do know that for some of you, this can be hard because doing less can feel uncomfortable. It can feel like you're cheating, like you're getting away with something. There's this belief that we need to feel completely destroyed after a workout or it didn't count. And actually, when I did that run with Daisy, at the end, there was a part of me that was like, I should be more tired than this. And this is a feeling that is worth noticing because it is exactly the thing that keeps a lot of you stuck. I think we somehow ended up believing that the value of exercise is measured in how exhausted we feel afterwards. And it's not. It never has been, and it isn't now. Some of the most useful training that you will ever do is the kind that you barely feel, the kind that leaves you with more rather than less, the ones that energize you. Now, that run got me thinking about the mindset that I used to have, where if I felt a bit off, if I felt like things weren't working, I would assume the answer was to do more, to put in more. And I think a lot of you can do this as well. You know, when you're tired or you're feeling a bit flat or the scales aren't moving, or perhaps the session that used to feel manageable, it's feeling a bit harder at the moment, then your mind doesn't go, maybe I need a bit more recovery or a bit more rest. It tends to go straight to, I need to try harder. I need to be training more. I need to do more cardio. I need to be tighter with my food, and I just need to have a bit more discipline. And there's nothing wrong with this instinct in general. You know, doing more really does feel like the right thing to do, and that you're just finally getting a bit more committed. And sometimes you do actually have to add in a bit more to push a bit and to ask more of yourself. But what I've noticed in myself and with so many women that I talk to is that more isn't always the thing that is actually missing. Very often, I'd say more often than not, the missing piece is actually the recovery, not the training itself, everything else that we do. And I think it helps to understand this when you think about what's actually happening in your body. We can think of the training as the stimulus, and that's the nudge, you know, the signal that tells your body something needs to change, that it needs to get a bit stronger, to cope a bit better. And that is an important part. So this isn't about saying that training doesn't count. It does. But the actual adapting, the bit where you're getting fitter and stronger, mostly happens afterwards while you're recovering. So the sessions and the recovery are both working together. They're two halves of the same job, which is why piling on more and more training when the recovery is not so great will so often not give you the results that you'd hoped for. You can feel like you're doing everything right in your sessions and still not get much back from it. We can be very good at training stress. We'll show up, we'll work hard, we'll push. That side of things we can be very comfortable with, can't we? It can often be the recovery that we find harder to take seriously. So easy to skip the recovery, resting, eating enough, easing off when we're worn out. None of this feels like it counts because it doesn't feel like an effort. or it does feel like an effort because you always feel like you should be doing more. And I think there can be this feeling that if you're doing that, then you're giving up. And so we then skip the recovery or squeeze it down to almost nothing and then wonder why all that hard work isn't quite doing what we thought it would do. And it isn't about discipline. It's more that we're just very good at pushing ourselves and just not very practiced at letting ourselves recover. Now, when you hear the word recovery, it might be that you picture this rest day, sitting on the sofa, not training. It might be that you feel a bit guilty about sitting on the sofa and resting, but that could be how you see a rest day. And that is a very small part of it, that whole sitting and recovering. Recovery is much bigger and I guess more ordinary than that. Now, the biggest piece by a mile, I think, is sleep. And it's where most of the actual repair happens. Your body does a huge amount of its rebuilding while you're sleeping. Isn't it clever? And most of your natural growth hormone, which is the stuff that's involved in repairing tissue, that gets released during your deepest sleep. And there's loads of research on this. There's actually a well-known study on basketball players where they did nothing except get the players to sleep a bit more, and their speed and their shooting accuracy both improved with no extra training involved, just more sleep. And there was also actually research with younger athletes showing the ones getting under about 8 hours a night were far more likely to get injured. So when you're short on sleep, your recovery slows down, your performance drops, things are going to feel harder than they normally do, and you're far more likely to pick up those niggles and injuries. So you can be doing everything else right, but if your sleep is a bit of a mess, you're going to be finding recovery so much harder. We also have the nutrition side of recovery, and specifically here, eating enough. And I am going to come back to this properly in a minute because it is a very important area to cover. But the shorter version is that your body cannot repair itself out of thin air with nothing. The building blocks have to come from somewhere. So if you're training hard and eating too little at the same time, you're asking for repairs without giving your body what it needs. And that's where the protein, the carbs, the fiber, all the stuff that I constantly bang on about gets so important. It is not just about fat loss. When you've done a strength session, your body is going to spend the next day or two rebuilding those muscles that you have worked. And there's a name for this. It's called muscle protein synthesis. You might have heard people talking about it online. And it stays switched on for somewhere around 24 to 48 hours afterwards. And this is the reason why what we eat the day after a session matters just as much as what we eat on the day itself. And it really does need protein to do that job. So if your eating is a bit all over the place, maybe you're skipping meals, you're grazing, you're really busy, so you're not really thinking about it, that session that you worked hard in does not get to do all the work it could do. And it isn't just lifting either. After a long run or a hard cardio session, your body is also going to be repairing and refueling in the background. And that leans on what you're eating just as much. The food is absolutely not separate from the training. It is part of how the training turns into what we want it to result in. And I learned this a bit the hard way. So I'd been training for years, but it took me ages to cotton on to this one. I had built some muscle, but not maybe as much as you'd expect for the amount of effort that I was putting in. And what changed this in the end was when I actually started paying proper attention to what I was eating around it. So getting enough protein, sitting down to eat, but in particular, having breakfast with plenty of protein in. I had been skipping breakfast and grazing a lot more. But once I started including that meal and then getting a whole portion of protein in that morning as well, my body really did start to respond. It's when I started noticing way more muscle actually showing up. The training was there. It had been there all along. I didn't adapt or change that in any way. It was the recovery side, in particular, the fueling that had been missing. And then as well as your nutrition, you've got the stuff that sits inside your training itself. You're going to have easier days. Not every session is going to leave you on the floor. Some are definitely meant to push you and plenty are meant to do the opposite. So they're the things that are going to keep you moving without making you feel worse. And that's what I learned on my easy run. And today I've taken it a bit easier in the gym as well. So we have those easier days and then we have the actual rest days where we are letting things settle. There's also what people call active recovery, which is gentle movement. So it doesn't mean that a rest day needs to have you just sitting on the sofa all day. You might be going for a gentle walk, a bit of stretching, a bit of pottering. These are the things that have you feeling better afterwards rather than depleting your energy more. And I think it's important to emphasize that because I do think active recovery can often be misunderstood. You see, the point of a gentle walk on that recovery day is that it does leave you feeling better than before you went out. If you're out there marching, hammering your step count, heart rate is going super high, treating that walk as this box you've got to tick, then that isn't a recovery walk. That's just more exercise that you're saying is a walk. So think about if that movement is giving you something back or if it's taking more out of you. It shouldn't be a walk that you're finishing thinking, right, I'm properly tired now, I've earned my dinner. You should be feeling calmer and better for it. And the area in recovery that is often neglected, it's something that I do try and talk about a fair bit, and it's one I really want to emphasize again here, is your overall stress. Our body doesn't have one stress bucket for exercise and a separate one for life in general. It is all going into that same one. Work, stress, family stress, mental load, lying awake, worrying, exercise, all of those things. Anything that you need to recover from and training, it's in that pot. And there's research on this that I really do find very interesting, where they compared people who were under a lot of life stress with people who were pretty chill, pretty relaxed. Who even are they? And it gave them the same workout. And the stressed group recovered way slower. They had the same exercise, same effort, but slower repair purely because of what was inside their heads. Emotional stress has such a big impact on our physical body. And it's worth remembering this, because if the rest of your life is pretty full on right now, that same workout that might have felt pretty easy a month ago might be feeling like quite a slog today. And there's nothing that's changed about the exercise itself. It's everything about the conditions you are asking your body to recover in that have changed. Now, just in case you don't know this about me, back in 2014, I got very, very ill. I had something called rheumatic fever, which is an autoimmune condition. Very retro, very vintage. But before I got this, and actually annoyingly for a little while after, it took me a long time to learn this lesson, I had been feeling very exhausted, really wrung out for a long time. And people would always say to me that I was doing too much. And in my head, I just could never make it fit, because they were talking about exercise. And I didn't feel like I was over exercising. I was doing less than a lot of other people. And I wasn't really strength training so much at that time. I really was just running a few times a week. But looking back now, this is exactly why I couldn't see it, because it wasn't the exercise. I wasn't over exercising at all. I was under recovering. My life was very busy. I had 2 young children I was teaching at the time. My husband was ill. We're doing up a house. There was a lot of cumulative load going on around me. And the mental, as much as the physical, really did just catch up with me in the end. And it, like I said, it took me quite a while to learn that lesson. And I think it'd be a really good point now to talk about what we're actually aiming for with recovery, because really recovery is invisible. You can't see it on a tracker, not reliably. It's something you just feel. But actually, on that point, I think it's worth mentioning tracking, because some of you will likely be tracking your sleep, your HRV, all of your recovery and that information that you get. And it can be really, really useful. But there is a bit of a tipping point where it stops helping and starts like adding to the stress you're experiencing. And this is something I see so often. And I had been guilty of it myself, because you end up chasing this number and stop noticing how you're actually feeling. And actually that worrying about the score becomes this little stress on its own. So some sleep researchers have even given this a name. It's when fixating on the data starts to make your sleep actually worse. And there's research that backs all of this up. So the people who get caught in it tend to sleep worse, not better. So I stopped wearing my watch overnight. I used to do it religiously, but I realized it wasn't helping me. It was just another thing that I would look at and worry about. So every now and then I'll catch a night where by accident, and I do have a look, but I don't use that as a main data point anymore. The main point is you want to feel rested. It's not about winning against the data. So here's what it might well feel like when things are going well. You start to look forward to exercise, or at least you're not dreading it. Your energy is pretty reasonable and steady throughout the day. You don't get those big crashes. You feel pretty capable, like your body can do the things that you're asking of it, and you quite enjoy moving. And then the progress you make is going to be gradual and enjoyable. You're not breaking records every single week. You might get newbie gains if you're just starting out with exercise, but you won't be breaking records every single week long term. But over the months, you can see that things are getting a little bit easier. You're getting a bit stronger. You're getting a bit more comfortable with it. And actually, with things like running, This is where it can be quite useful going out with somebody who is a bit slower than you on your long runs, that is. I remember doing half marathon training years ago with my husband who hadn't run for ages, and he was running slower than me. And we'd do our long runs together, but we would run really quite slowly. And actually, looking back, this was really quite beneficial to me. I think I saw quite a lot of improvement in my running at that point. And it was all starting to feel really good. I think when you're out running on your own or you're out with people that are quicker than you can get this feeling of constantly wanting to push and keep up. But actually going a bit slower with him likely helped my recovery that I have a tendency to skip at other times. When recovery is working, your body wants to say yes to more things than it does say no to. So that's why I felt like I was able to go on that walk. But there is the other side, of course. We have poor recovery. And that has a fairly recognizable set of symptoms as well. And I would put money on a lot of you recognizing at least a couple of these. Here we're thinking constant tiredness, that when you wake up in the morning, that normal night's sleep hasn't touched it. Your workouts feel like they're going backwards, where things that you could easily do suddenly start to feel quite hard. You've got soreness that hangs around longer than it used to. You might find that you're a bit snappy or irritable with no clear reason. Sleep might be off as well, so you're feeling pretty exhausted. And that can feel like a bit of a cruel joke. And sleep can actually be off. You might not be sleeping as well, even though you're really exhausted. I don't know if you've ever had those nights where you are so tired, but still waking up in the night. And that can feel like a bit of a cruel joke. You also might lose your motivation to train when in the past you actually quite liked it. It's just that feeling of being a bit flat, a bit meh about everything. But I do want to make a point here about soreness, because I did mention that you might experience more soreness after training. That ache a day or two after sessions has the name DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. And a bit of that can be completely normal, especially when you're new to training in that way, or you've just changed up the training. It's the start of a new block. What is not such a good sign is getting it badly week in, week out. There can be this feeling that being sore means that you've had a really good workout, that we've done something, that we've worked hard. And a little now and then is absolutely fine. I do still quite like it if I feel like my core's worked hard. But if you're constant, quite severe, it can be your body telling you that it needs more recovery. And you might be sat there just going, well, this is just my normal life. This is what I'm like all the time. But I do want to just suggest that maybe your normal might actually be a description of someone who is often under recovered. It is so common to assume that this is just what being a woman in her 40s, 50s, etc. feels like. And it might not be. Often it's just that your body is going, I need a bit more recovery now, please, and you're not giving it to me. And if we think about how that actually starts to seep into our lives, it's never this big like moment where you go, oh, I'm under recovered. It can be really small. You might be sleeping a bit worse for a couple of weeks. You might have this big work thing on and you just keep going. You keep training the same. You're adding more there, because why wouldn't you? Those are things that you do. And then the sessions start to feel a bit harder. So you feel like you're just a bit soft and you try and push through. And then you find yourself getting a bit grumpy at home in the evenings and you just want to sit down and do nothing, and you put it down to being tired, which is true, but you don't connect it to the training and the other stresses going on. And then weeks go by like this and you're just continuing that pattern again. There is no point where an alarm is going off. You just suddenly are at this version of you that feels worse than it used to. And this is how life is now. And it's normal. And that's the thing with being chronically under recovered for so long. It really does feel like normal now. Now, back to answering some of the points in that original message. How do you tell the difference between undereating, too much exercise, life stress, poor sleep, and perimenopause symptoms? Because a lot of these things can look almost identical from the outside. When we've got low energy, we just have low energy. Your body's not going to go, oh, this low energy is caused because of training, and this low energy is caused because you've got that perimenopause symptom, or this low energy is caused because of work. So I think instead of trying to name it perfectly, I think it's more useful to ask yourself a few questions and then just follow the trail. Treat yourself as a bit of a research project. So start with food, because this one often gets overlooked. Are you actually eating enough to support what you're doing? And I don't mean in this diet culture voice that's been in your head that is telling you what you should be eating, but I mean enough for the amount that you're actually doing. There is a real thing that I think every woman who trains should know about. It gets called lower energy availability, and there's a broader version of this, which is relative energy deficiency in sport. RED-S is the shortened version. And this was something that was first spotted in athletes. Now, the athlete origin is likely why a lot of us are very quick to wave this away. And I do want to push back against that, because it's easy to hear RED-S and assume that it could not possibly apply to you. That is only really a thing for serious athletes, marathon runners, people training for hours a day. Or it might be that you think, well, if I really wasn't eating enough, surely I would see the weight just dropping off me, and it hasn't. So that can't be me. Or you might assume that you'd have to be very, very thin for something like this to count and matter. And if you're not, you're going to be crossing it straight off the list. But the thing is, it isn't about any of that. It isn't about being an athlete or being especially lean or the scales suddenly moving. It's simply about not giving your body enough fuel for what you're actually asking of it. So in simple terms, it just means that once you subtract the energy you use exercising, there is not enough left to cover everything else your body needs to run itself properly. And researchers have actually put a rough line on it. It's a level that you don't want to drop below. You go under that and your body starts protecting itself. It keeps the essentials running and it pulls back on everything else. And then your recovery suffers, your performance drops. And over time, it can affect your hormones, your bones, your sleep, your mood, everything. And the cruel irony is that the undereating can produce the exact tiredness and the stalled progress that makes you think you need to train harder and eat less. So you do more of the thing that caused it. But if you think your food really does seem fine, then we need to look at the exercise itself and think about whether your easy days are actually easy, or whether, like me, you're letting everything drift into moderately hard. A week where every single session is a battering is a week with no recovery built into it. You don't need every workout to be really painful. You just need most of them to be repeatable. And then there is everything else going on in your life right now. You already know where I stand on this because we've spoken about it already, but it's that point about it all going into the one bucket. The only real question here is whether you have got a lot on right now. Maybe you've got a big work thing on, a poorly kid, a parent to look after, just a relentless run of things happening. And if you have, then it isn't separate from your training. And the fix is usually not a better workout. It's going to be doing a bit less for just a little while and not making yourself feel guilty or wrong about that. Sleep is the same. We know how important it is for the repair that's going to happen. The thing to notice here is how yours feels. And I don't mean here just the number of hours that you've got on paper, but whether you wake up feeling rested, or are you having to drag yourself out no matter what the clock says? And if it is the second one, then it's very likely that this is an area that you'll want to focus on first. And I know for a lot of you, there's also going to be perimenopause sitting in the background as well, which can impact your sleep and your recovery and how much stress that you're going to be able to carry. And it does deserve a proper mention. So I am going to come back to it. And I know that when I'm saying all of this, it feels like there's loads of possible causes and it can feel quite overwhelming, and that you need to be a detective to try and work things out. So the practical way of looking at it is not feeling like you have to identify the exact culprit now straight away. I would just focus on changing one thing as though you are your own science project. Start with the one that's most obviously off. So if you know your sleep has been a bit rubbish, then protect that first and do that for a couple of weeks and see if things start to feel a bit easier. If you suspect that you're not eating enough, then add in some proper meals. Focus around having those few meals a day, especially looking at around what you're eating and your training and whether your energy starts to feel a bit steadier. And of course, if life is feeling quite relentless right now, either drop down to your minimums with your exercise or see if there's any ways of reducing that stress and see what happens there. But give it a fortnight and really do reflect and pay attention. Your body is very good at telling you which thread it is that you've got to pull. and you'll get a good idea as to whether it's working as long as you're not trying to yank them all at the same time. Now, the word overtraining does get thrown around a lot and it can sound quite scary, but true overtraining syndrome, and by this I mean the proper clinical version, is actually pretty rare. It usually takes serious, sustained, very high volume training to get there. The kind of thing that competitive athletes are at risk of having. And it's not most of us that are juggling 3 workouts a week around full-time life. So you're probably not overtrained in the strict sense of things. What is incredibly common though, and what I see again and again and again, is that we live in this state of chronic under-recovery. It's not that you're doing this wild amount of exercise. It's that you're never quite giving yourself the conditions to bounce back from the exercise that you are doing. So your training might be quite reasonable. The recovery around it then becomes a missing link. And when you're doing that steady exercise, as we said just recently, the effect can build up quite slowly, which is why we can miss it. And there isn't that single moment where it's going to go wrong. You just gradually start feeling a bit worse month on month on month, and assuming that is how life is now. There is a really old idea in the science here that I think does explain it really well. And it goes back to a researcher whose name I'll probably get wrong, Hans Sell, who described how the body reacts to any kind of stress in stages. So it sounds an alarm and dips first, then it adapts and copes. And then if the stress just never lets up, it eventually tips over into exhaustion. And your training does work the same way. When you stress the body with a workout, it dips first. You're tired, a bit weaker, a bit run down. Then if you give it what it needs, it repairs and comes back slightly stronger than before, ready for next time. And there's even a name for this, which is called supercompensation. Sounds a little bit like supercalifragilistic. But anyway, supercompensation, which is a lovely word for a very simple thing. Your body building back a touch beyond where it started. That cycle, stress and recover and then come back stronger, is the main way that we get stronger and fitter. The catch is that it only works if the recovery part is actually happening as well. If you keep hitting the stress button before the coming back stronger part has actually finished, then you never quite finish that climb. You just keep dipping. So the person who trains a little bit less but recovers fully often ends up fitter than the person who's training more but never lets that cycle complete. And this is just how the body works. But it's worth remembering that when you are comparing yourself to a friend who seems to be making loads of progress but doesn't train anywhere near as much as you. And the bit here that can also trip us up a little is that first dip, because feeling weaker the day after a hard session can read like going backwards sometimes. And it isn't. It's just the normal first half of the process. And the answer to this is time, food, sleep, and not just piling on another hard session. So think of it as this, a bit of a reframe for you. Recovery is the second half of the workout. It's not the absence of one. How much recovery you actually need between sessions depend on what the session was actually like in the first place. So a lot of you will think, well, if you trained yesterday, then that's it. You absolutely cannot run or do a training today. But if you've properly recovered, you may well be able to. So if you've done a gentle 5 or 10 minute body weight routine, what I call the PJ workouts, they don't take much recovery at all. So you can do those most days. But a hard all out session is a very different story. And that one is going to take a bit more time to recover from. So you could still do some active recovery, some stretching and so on in between, but you're not going to be going and doing another workout like that. So it's less about a fixed rule and more about how hard you actually went and then how you recovered and how you actually feel. Now, midlife, perimenopause, that time, it does change things. I know it's annoying, but I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. At this stage of life, it's likely that your sleep is more disrupted. And that can be for hormonal reasons that feel completely out of your control. You might have night sweats, they're waking at 3 a.m. And recovery can take a little longer than it used to. And really annoyingly, our ability to handle stress can be harder at a time in life when we often have more of it going on. You might well be at the pinnacle of your career, or your kids are demanding. We've got aging parents, lots of mental load, and it can feel like it's always yours to hold on to. So you've got higher demands on your recovery, and at the same time, a body that is a bit more sensitive to whether that recovery is actually happening. Thank you, body. And I know that it can sound depressing, but it isn't. It just means that recovery stops being optional. in our 20s, perhaps we got away with it a little bit more. We could treat sleep and food and rest as these afterthoughts, and we seem to be able to get away with it. And now we can't, or at least we can't as well. And the women who do very, very well at this stage of life are almost never the ones training the hardest. They are the ones who have got the recovery side of things sorted. And this then means that their training actually counts. So doing the basics well becomes the advantage. And that is in so many areas of life. And I think this can actually be a bit of a relief when we think about it, because the basics are within reach for most of us. But there is a bit of a balancing act here too. I don't want you to be thinking that I'm telling you not to exercise or not to do the thing that you actually love doing. Strength training matters more than ever at this stage of life. It really is one of the best things that you can do for yourself right now, for your muscles, your bones, your future health, your future independence even. And the same goes for those cardio-based exercises, if it's running that you enjoy or walking, hiking, whatever it is that keeps you moving and feeling like you. They're important. The point isn't to back off any of it. It's that the things that are worth doing like that are worth supporting properly with enough food and enough recovery around them so they can actually do all the good that they are capable of. You're not going to be protecting it by hammering it into the ground. You're going to protect it by giving it what it needs to keep going. This is something you want to keep doing. And I think that's often a question that we should ask ourselves. Can I see myself managing to do it like this forever, like for long term? So let's think about how we know if we found the right amount. And I'm not going to be giving you a number because it really does depend on your life, and your life is not going to be the same as anyone else's. But what I can give you is a handful of questions to ask, and to ask and answer honestly as a bit of a reflective experience. So first, ask yourself, are you recovering between sessions, or are you turning up to the next one already pretty tired? Is your energy across the day pretty decent, or do your workouts leave you feeling wiped out and slumped on the sofa for hours after? Are you on the whole looking forward to moving, or is it starting to feel like one more thing that you've got to grit your teeth through? Is your progress trending gently in the right direction over a period of months, or has it stalled or started to go backwards? And then likely the simplest one, but a very important one, is do you feel like exercise is adding to your life or taking from it? And I really do think if you're going to take one of these questions away with you to reflect on the most, I'd keep that last one. Exercise is absolutely meant to be giving you things, more energy, more strength, a clearer head, a calmer mind, a body that feels capable and does what you want it to do. If it is constantly leaving you feeling more depleted than you started, then this is a sign, and it's not a sign to push harder. And actually, this is where we can think about minimums and optimals. Again, it's something that I use a lot inside the membership. And the minimum is going to be the thing that keeps you moving forward, even when life is crazy. It's not the lazy option. It's more of the floor that you do not drop below. It's the thing that keeps the habit alive, and the progress then is ticking over. And that is what you take into place when you've got nothing left to spare. And then the optimal, what you will push for when you can, is the thing that you do when you have got more capacity, more headspace, more energy to give, more time on your hands, when life isn't just feeling particularly crazy at the moment. And the mistake that a lot of people make is treating the optimal as the thing that they always have to do every time, and then feeling like a failure when life does get in the way and they are going to those minimums. But if you've managed the minimum on a hard week, that is such a good win. Doing something when everything is going against you is not falling short. It's the entire point. Some weeks you will be able to do more and feel brilliant and definitely enjoy those. And we do want to start getting more of those than not. But there will also be days and weeks where you can't, and your minimum is there to keep you doing something. It's the system just working as it should. You are still moving forward. You're just moving forward in a way that allows you to keep on going. And what counts as enough is also going to change. That's not going to be the same all the time. So a week where your kids are off and work is crazy is not necessarily going to be a week to push for your optimal. And if you keep trying to do that, you end up running on empty. So it's more for pushing when you've got that capacity, when sleep is better, when you can really lean in and do a bit more. because you've got that recovery to back it up. And that is what's going to keep you going for years rather than burning out because you've just done this really hard month. It applies to so many areas in life. So if you have been feeling a bit flat and your first instinct was that you need to do more, I would like you to reconsider this and actually think about doing the opposite before you do more. Look at your sleep. Look at whether you are, in fact, eating enough for what you're asking of yourself. And in that, I also want you to think about what you're eating in those meals and then look at how much the rest of your life is taking up. And be honest about whether your easy days are actually easy, or if, like me, you'd perhaps start to just push a little bit more. The answer is so often not another session. It's letting the sessions that you're already doing do what they need to do. Quality over quantity. And a reminder before I leave you that recovery is not the thing that gets in the way of progress. Recovery is where the progress is actually going to happen. You are allowed to do enough rather than as much as possible. Sometimes enough is enough. And if this episode has resonated with you and you're wanting to make changes that actually fit around your life, then we would love to have you with us inside the Ruth McFit membership. There is a walkthrough linked in the show notes that you can go and take a look at, or you can head to ruthmcfit.com for more information. And of course, if you've got any questions at all, you can send them over to me on Instagram or Facebook. I'm at Ruth McFit on both. And if you've enjoyed this episode, you want to hear more, the best thing you can do is subscribe, leave a quick 5-star review. It really does help other women find the show. So thank you so much for being here and listening. And until next time, goodbye.